Metro City is a very dark place in 2005. Many of the citizens exhibit strange behaviors, making them into animals on the dance floor. Okay, to be serious, Condemned is one of the most atmospheric games you guys can play. There is something about it that just sticks with you. Maybe it's the rundown urban decay, the unrelenting tension, or the sheer brutality of it all, but this isn't the game about creeping through the haunted mansions or fighting off supernatural monsters or clones, like in F.E.A.R. This is the kind of horror that feels way too real. The kind where the worst monster is a human, not something made up by author's mind. To be honest, modern horrors have lost their flair. Yeah, the reenactment of Silent Hill was good, but apart from that, horror genre has mostly died out in my opinion. Latest Amnesia games went entirely different direction from the atmospheric horrors that they were, going into experiments such as Bunker. Also, if you would like to hear me talk about it, please let me know in the comments. Condemned, on the other hand, was quite special. It has a lot of jank, but it was done with the horror soul, trying to make everything from atmosphere to story click for the player. Compared to F.E.A.R, that also comes from Monolith, Condemned is much less of graphically cool shooter with the side of horror. It is instead primarily a horror with a focus on environment and survival in less than optimal circumstances. Many of you have probably played more than one game from Monolith. The younger ones might remember Middle-earth series with Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor, while others from the older generation might remember Alien vs Predator 2. In general, Monolith Productions are a very talented studio releasing many games, each not really similar to anything else that they did. And while there are people who are trying to find parallels between Condemned and F.E.A.R, since they come out in the same year, by the feel and atmosphere I would compare it more to Manhunt, which was an older and very controversial game in its time. And speaking of atmosphere, Condemned might not have the flashiest visuals by today's standards, but back in 2005, the game looked like it crawled out of the very grimy crime documentary, and I mean that as a compliment. Everything in the game feels dirty, broken and unnerving. Metro City isn't the place you'd want to visit, even with police escort. The walls are covered in graffiti, the buildings are crumbling, and every light bulb is either flickering or long dead, so pretty similar to the country where I live. Probably out of sheer depression from being stuck in the city. And in this game, depression is the intended experience, unlike some of the modern titles. And sure, you could say, hey, it's mid-2000s, of course everything looks brown and grey, but it works. The muted colors and grimy textures aren't just a stylistic choice, they're a statement. This isn't a world of heroes and hope. It's a place where even a fresh coat of paint would look tired and miserable. What really sells the atmosphere though is the environmental storytelling. Abandoned apartments with overturned furniture and bloodstains tell their own stories. Empty department stores where the mannequins feel way too lifelike for comfort, and sometimes they are. Every corner of Metro City tells a story of bad things happened here, and worse things are about to happen to you. And then there's sound design. Everything about this game sounds really close and personal. Footsteps, breath of enemies, their chatter between each other. Sometimes when you try to hit enemies, characters will swear while swinging his weapon, and enemies will be rude to you as well. But don't worry, you can punish them with good old blocker to the door face technique that came down to you from your grandfather. Condemned isn't your typical horror with jump scares every 5 seconds. It wants you to stew in tension. It's kind of a game where even a mannequin standing perfectly still feels like it's planning something sinister, which by the way is an actual thing you'll have to deal with. A big part of this made from the fact that enemy AI is made to avoid confronting you right away, and swarm you directly. Enemies will be hiding behind corners, pose as mannequins, wait until you move forward and sneak up on you. In general, you never feel safe, as there is always someone planning to do something bad to you, and you know the city wants you dead, or worse. So yeah, Metro City will make sure you live with newfound appreciation for working light bulbs and functional security systems. So, as expected from violent and gritty game, combat is raw, brutal and deeply personal, because guns, you ain't gonna have a lot of that. Ammo is about as rare as friendly face in Metro City. Most of the time you're swinging anything you can get your hands on, be it a pipe, plank, shovel, a locker door, or anything else. The question is of course why almost every location in the damn game has a ready variety of most of the household tools such as sledgehammer and fire axe, but that's a question for another time. When you fight you can practically feel the crunch of metal pipe meeting someone's skull. This isn't your typical action game where you spam attacks and watch enemies fall over. In Condemned, combat is slow, deliberate and downright nasty. Swing too early and you're left wide open. Wait for too long and the other guy clocks you first. While the combat is slow, it also feels quite clunky. Many of the enemy movesets are very unclear since they will do some weird dance-like movements before actually hitting you. Block also doesn't trigger at once. Instead you need to do it almost half a second before the hit connects, but not earlier or later, since then you are vulnerable for a hit. Most enemies are gonna be doing ballerina dance every time you hit them. They're gonna turn around from the momentum of your hit and then do a full 360 degrees to hit you back in the face. At first, it might seem weird that you can't really combo them into early retirement from criminal life, but over time you get used to the fact that the best approach is basically attacking, stepping back, blocking and attacking again. As I mentioned previously, the game also features firearms. While they are available, you won't ever be able to have them on your person at all times. The thing is that despite being built like a truck, main character cannot really hold more than one weapon on him at one time. Not only that, he seems incapable of also stocking up on magazines or bullets, so every firearm is only valid for one magazine. Afterwards, the only way how you can use it is to hit someone in the head with the other side of it. This makes it look like our protege is a bit dense about how guns supposed to work. On the other side, it's a plot point that he has a dense bow, so I guess it all fits. The game also gives you two special moves to use, regardless of the weapon that you're carrying. One of them is the ultimate karate kick, which, by the way, can hit at any height. Given that we are barely older guy that looks like a medium-sized cabinet, I'm very interested where did he achieve such feats of stretching. But after all, perhaps apart from high criminality, Metro City also features a great yoga classes. Of course, Condemned tries to remind you that you're a detective, you know, in between all the pipe swinging and leg kicking. The game features investigation sequences where you whip out your high-tech forensic tools to gather evidence at crime scenes. It's a neat idea, in theory. In practice these segments are pretty scripted. Game decides for you which tool to use, when to use it, and highly guides you for where to point it as well. Given all of this, it's hard to believe that we are the best detective in the city, although given the steadily rising crime levels, it all makes sense. That said, these investigation moments do help break up the pacing and give you a breather between the brawls. They also add the story's grim atmosphere, reinforcing that you're not just surviving, you're also a detective who tries to solve the riddle of a serial killer. But make no mistake, Condemned is at its core a game about survival. It's all about feeling vulnerable, scrambling for makeshift weapons, and fighting both tooth and nail to make it to the next room. Every encounter feels tense and unpredictable, and by the time you're done, you'll probably never look at the rusty pipe the same way again. Talking about survival while chasing someone, let's talk about the story, so if you want to play the game yourself and don't want it spoiled, go to here. So, while they left, let's continue. Condemned puts you in the shoes of Ethan Thomas, an FBI detective who specializes in hunting down the worst of the worst, serial killers. You know, the kind of people who make even other criminals go, yeah, that guy's messed up. His latest target is the Matchmaker, a charming individual whose idea of art involves posing his victims with mannequins, and to be fair, FBI is not amused. Ethan is introduced being the best detective on the block, despite not being able to choose the correct tool by himself. We arrive at the crime scene alongside a few colleagues trudging through the slums of Metro City. Right away, the setting establishes the tone for the entire game. Bleak, oppressive and rugged, much like the cop banter you hear throughout the scene. Oh, and let's not forget the frame rate. The game starts dipping just enough to remind you that it is in fact mid-2000s game, but we'll get back to that later. The most recent Matchmaker crime scene awaits us, and it's here that we get a quick crash course in the game investigation mechanics. They're pretty straightforward. Point gadget, find evidence, look like you know what you're doing. Before you can settle into detective mode though, another officer catches a whiff of smoke from the next room, and that's when the things kick off. You're sent chasing after what seems to be a matchmaker himself. At this point, the game toys with your expectations. It hands you a gun and makes you think, oh, okay, it might be a shooter, same as F.E.A.R. But just as quickly, it rips that comfort away. You encounter a strange, trippy cutscene of the perp flipping off the electricity. While you're trying to get the light back on, electricity zaps you, your gun flies away, the perp comes in, takes your gun, says bam, and goes off refusing to elaborate. We catch up on him later when he ambushes us, uses our gun to kill 2 policemen and then runs away. We wake up next day in our apartment with some weird old guy by the name Malcolm Van Horn saying that FBI plans to put those deaths on us and suggests we escape quickly. This guy will be calling us and telling us to find true killer many times during the game, as well as stalking us in a manner totally not befitting a bad guy, right? I myself am quite sure that we can trust him. From there, it's a downward spiral into heart of the Metro City's darkest corners. And when I say dark, I'm not talking metaphorically. You will really need your flashlight. Ethan, now on the run, has to clear his name while tracking down the true killer. The problem is, everyone in the city seems to want him dead. And they're all armed with pipes, bats and wearing clothes that didn't see washing machines since last century. Not only that, but on top of your main investigation, we had a side story going on, told to us during load screens and some environmental storytelling. So the city gets a huge violence increase, with more people turning violent than ever before. Even cops that patrol bad districts are affected. What is even more strange is that birds everywhere in the city start dying and falling down from the skies. Some of the birds are actually the collectibles in this game. But no, you ain't getting a cool OP gun for collecting them all, so there is not much point. What starts a straightforward murder investigation quickly spirals into something far stranger. Cryptic messages, eerie hallucinations, and subtle hints suggest there's more to play here than just one twisted killer. And the Malcolm Van Horn calling us and saying, "Use your gifts, Ethan, you can do it, Ethan," add up to it. Actually, if it wasn't for the fact that he is very creepy, his support is probably the support I need in my life. Because his calls consist mostly of saying, "Hey Ethan, you're a cool guy, you can do this. Okay, I'm too busy, so call you later. Bye." But our main focus is the guy who stole our gun. And for the first few levels, you're hot on his trail, chasing him through a labyrinth of metro system of Metro City, fittingly enough. Eventually, you catch sight of him boarding a train, and in true action hero fashion you leap onto the back of it. You grab hold of big metallic object to steady yourself, but instead of smashing your way into the train, you just stand there like an idiot, waiting to fall off. I was standing there for the whole 2 minutes of the sequence shouting at screen, "For fuck's sake, just break this damn glass, Eden." But then, as if to mock you, the guy you're chasing does exactly what you should have done from the start. He smashes the glass like it's no big deal, sending you tumbling off the train in a moment that's humiliating and infuriating. So anyhow, you continue following this guy, still thinking that he's a matchmaker. You catch another train to go to the mannequin shop, where he supposedly gets his art supplies for his still life shots with victims. While going, you get a call from Bureau where your boss is trying to be nice, saying that he understands that Ethan was under a lot of pressure and some people handle stress differently, like decide to kill 2 colleagues at work seems. He says that this stuff happens and they will figure it out if he just gives himself up. Ethan obviously shouts that he is okay and he doesn't need any help, especially mental one. Then continues to have another hallucination so that we know he is totally fine. Proceeding further, what you find in the mannequin shop though is that the guy that stole your gun ain't matchmaker. Instead, he is a serial killer of serial killers. What a twist. Since this game was almost exactly prior to Dexter TV series, perhaps they got inspiration from this? Not only does he kill them, he also kills them in the same fashion that they kill their victims. And here would be important to note that he targets all the serial killers from Ethan's investigation list, seemingly using him to uncover their location and identities. We're also introduced to the fact that Ethan has investigated a lot of serial killers, each with their own quirks, and the next one on the list is the torturer, so we go fast to save him from the punishment. Cause, you know, Ethan can kill hundreds of bad guys in this game, but can't allow one serial killer to kill another. You know, this would be against his rules. So continuing on, we find ourselves following torturer's last victim, which helps us find the perps himself in his old house somewhere outside the city. When we get to him, we find that he's already dead, led to suicide by our Dexter wannabe. We disguise ourselves as him, wait for the guy, and as soon as he comes close, we start one of the few boss sequences in the game, where we run around the house in circles for several minutes while sometimes giving each other a couple hits. This is truly not how I imagined this fight to go, but what can you do? As you finally take down serial killer X, this is how we call this Dexter wannabe, you're blindsided by a familiar face, Malcolm Van Horn. Remember him? That totally not suspicious old guy from the beginning of the game. Turns out that he was suspicious. Who could have thought? And here comes the family drama. Leland Van Horn, our Dexter wannabe, is actually his nephew. But wait, it gets even weirder. Leland isn't just a rogue serial killer, he's been manipulated by a mysterious cult named Oro. And if you're wondering how cults tie into this mess, well, apparently the Oro have been pulling the strings behind all the chaos in Metro City. These guys aren't your average cloak-wearing chant-reciting cultists though. No, the Oro are packing some seriously strange tech, including sonic devices that drive people insane. And leading the pack is creepy cult leader with metal jammed into his face, because why not? As things come to the head, Leland tries to finish you off, but Malcolm steps in at the last second, saving your life. He asks you to kill one truly responsible for everything, the cult leader himself. What follows is your final showdown. You hack and bash your way through a horde of crazed cultists in a gameplay sequence that's less psychological horror, and more Left 4 Dead sequence, with the sheer amount of enemies thrown at you. After cutting through the mob, you finally face off against the metal-faced leader. It's a brutal fight, but in the end you come out on top, figuratively and literally kicking his ass. With the Horus leader defeated, the madness gripping Metro City is hopefully put to rest. So for the ending, the game lulls you into thinking that there is more than one, as Malcolm Van Horn proceeds to take you back into the city in his car. As you're driving to the city, you hear a sound. It seems that Leland still survived, and you stop the car to finish him off. As you open the trunk, you are given the choice to shoot him or not. Don't worry, it won't influence anything, as the ending after it is identical anyway. However, given a team of Aura controlling everyone into doing violence, and those cultists literally appearing around Ethan during the scene, I decided not to shoot, just to spite them. So here it is, the story of Condemned. Before we end, let me say a couple things about the technical state of the game. So Condemned was a product of mid-2000s, where the word's technical polish were more of a suggestion than a requirement. Let's be real, Condemned wasn't exactly a technical marvel even at launch, and time hasn't been very kind to it. But hey, for a game that's almost 2 decades old, it holds up, mostly. First off, let's talk performance. So, I don't know how it is for you, but this game had an awful FPS once I launched this game. It was very jittery and almost impossible to play. I can recommend downloading FPS fix that you can find on the internet. I got it from these guys. Didn't seem to infect my PC with anything, so it seems to be okay. After applying this patch, the game was running smoothly. But, as it's also written on the website, you have to limit your FPS. As higher it is, the longer it takes for Ethan to climb stairs, or actually any elevated positions, as well as it creates all kind of interesting physics problems. To be honest, stairs were the biggest enemy of mine in this game, as they were taking so damn long to get up.
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
It's F.E.A.R!
Well, it was kinda all elevated, almost like a hill, and Ethan treated almost the whole level like damn stairs.
Eternity later.
But apart from that, the game runs okay. I didn't have a single crash or game-breaking bug. The resolution worked out okay, and compared to F.E.A.R, subtitles and UI scale together with everything else. And then there's the AI. Let's just say enemies in Condemned are hit or miss. Sometimes they'll surprise you with clever ambushes and flanking maneuvers, making you feel like you're up against genuinely dangerous foes. Other times, you'll catch one of them randomly running away, then running back as if they're confused. You will see them hide behind corner right in front of your eyes, with half their body still being visible behind the column. It seems like together with increasing violent tendencies, Aura has also burned their frontal lobe. One thing that deserves praise though is the sound design. Even after all these years, Condemned's audio work is phenomenal. The creaking pipes, distant footsteps, and unsettling ambient noises still hit hard, no glitches there. It's the kind of soundscape that makes you instinctively look over your shoulder, even if you know you're not alone in the room. So overall, Condemned Criminal Origins isn't a perfect game, and it never was, but that's kind of the point. It's messy, it's rough around the edges, but it hits you with the kind of horror that sticks in your brain long after you put the controller down. This isn't a game that throws supernatural monsters or over-the-top scares at you. It's the kind of horror that feels uncomfortably real, the fear of dark alleyways, abandoned buildings, and people you'd cross the street to avoid. Sure, it has its quirks, the combat is a bit clunky, the story gets weird, and the technical state is, well, very mid-2000s. That's part of its charm. It's like finding an old VHS tape in your basement. A little dusty, a little creepy, and somehow more effective because of its imperfections. What really sets Condemned apart is its atmosphere. Few games nail that gritty urban horror vibe like this one. It doesn't rely on flashy gimmicks, instead it builds tension through its environments, its sound design, and the simple fact that you're never really sure what's waiting around the next corner. So should you go back and rediscover Condemned? Absolutely. As long as you're ready for a game that punches you in the face both figuratively and literally. It's a great experience that's well worth revisiting, even if it might leave you questioning your home decor choices. Okay guys, thank you a lot for listening. This is Neurotalk Gaming signing off. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing in the channel. And if you have anything you would like me to discuss going forward, I'm always happy to hear some fresh ideas. Okay guys, see you in the next one.